All right. Whenever you're ready.
Okay. Awesome. Well, hi, everybody. Thank you so much to all of our wonderful panelists for being here today and for our audience for viewing. My name is Belle Kozabowski. I am a project archivist here at the Auburn Avenue Research Library. I'm so excited to be with you all today for this panel on preserving Black foodways in Atlanta. Before we start with any introductions of our panelists, I just want to give a huge thank you to my lovely colleagues here at AARL. Truly, this conference would not be happening or running without so many people's hands and hard work behind the scenes. So, to them, I'm so grateful. And now I have the pleasure of introducing our moderator for today's panel, my colleague and friend, John Washington. John is an emerging archivist, researcher, and cultural curator, passionate about preserving and interpreting historical narratives. He currently works as an administrative technician here at Auburn, where he supports an organization of collections, conducts oral history interviews, and assists with archival metadata creation. Beyond his archival work, John runs Black Tie Cooking, which is a catering venture that blends bold flavors and creative techniques to craft memorable dining experiences. He is also deeply committed to learning about African and Afro-diasporic foodways, a pursuit that informs his understanding of cultural history and identity. Through both his professional development and personal projects, John strives to preserve, celebrate, and share stories that shape our collective heritage. So, welcome, John.
Thank you so much, Belle, and thank you to AARL for letting me moderate. And I have the grand pleasure of introducing all our phenomenal panelists. Today we have Chef Todd Richards. He is the former culinary director of Jackmont Hospitality with previous experiences at top establishments like Four Seasons Hotel, White Oak Kitchen, and Cocktails and Beyond. He served as the opening corporate chef for One Flew South at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, leading the team that made it the first airport restaurant to contend for the prestigious James Beard Award. In 2018, Richard debuted Soul, a chef's culinary evolution in 150 recipes, deemed one of the best cookbooks of the year by Grub Street, Food 52, Amazon, and others. His second cookbook, Roots, Heart, Soul, The Story, Celebration, Recipes of Afro Cuisine in America, was released in 2024 and inspired his first podcast venture, Roots, Heart, Soul, with co-host Stephen Aiti. Then we have Ernest Oliver. Ernest Oliver is Director of Operation at Paschal's Restaurant and an accomplished operations leader with extensive experience in restaurants and retail management. He has proven a track record of driving financial performance, optimizing labor and inventory systems, and implementing sustainable practice that strengthen long-term profitability. With expertise in Restaurant 365 and other operational platforms, Ernest specializes in streamlining workflows, training high-performing teams, and enhancing guest experiences through effective leadership. Throughout his career, he has been recognized for his ability to balance strategic oversight with hands-on management, ensuring operational excellence across multiple locations. Ernest is deeply committed to fostering collaborative work environments, mentoring future leaders, and aligning businesses with practices with organizational goals. Then we have Christie Agbale, owner and operator of Le Nouveau Marquis. Christie is a proud owner and operator of Le Nouveau Marquis, a West African restaurant in Georgia that has been serving the community for more than 15 years. For the past 8 years, Christie has led the restaurant with a deep love for sharing the flavors and traditions she grew up with, and a belief that good food can bring people together, no matter where they come from. Through Le, through Le Nouveau Marquis, Christie has worked to put African cuisine back in the spotlight while keeping her doors open to everyone who wants to experience it. Her restaurant has become a welcoming space where culture, flavor, and community come together, and where every meal tells a story of connection and pride. Yet again, thank you to our panelists for showing up today. So the first question I want to ask everyone is, and I feel like it's a pretty routine question, how did you get into the restaurant industry?
Who do you want to start?
We can start with you, Chef Todd.
All right. Good afternoon to everyone. Good Friday to everyone. We appreciate everyone being here on the webinar. I got into the food industry by happenstance. I was leaving University of Illinois, coming here to go to Georgia Tech, and came here in '92. At the tail end of Freaknik, and became a Freaknik baby, like so many of us who moved here, from other cities. And I started at Kroger right there on La Vista Road. They needed a butcher. And I said, yeah, I can butcher. I've been doing that with my dad since I was a kid because all the barbecues were at the house. And then went to work with Tom Catherall, great Atlanta fame, at Tom Tom's and Tom Tom's too. And then, met, one of the greatest chefs in this country, Chef Daryl Evans, first certified executive chef, of African American heritage as well. He was on the Culinary Olympic team, won 4 gold medals, 1 silver medal, and really just started my career at that. So needless to say that, I was supposed to show up at Georgia Tech on the first day of school, which I never did because I was already working and having a great time in the food and beverage industry, and never really looked back. And I saved my parents a lot of money, I guess, by not attending such an expensive school. But it's been really great being able to use both science and food in order to create a message of talking about African American communities and beyond.
All right,
Mr. Auburn?
I'll go next. So I started in the restaurant industry as a young man, fresh out of high school, actually. I got my first management job when I was 18 and ran my own restaurant a little after that. Did that for a few years. I moved here in '98, and most of my time was spent either in the catering scene with Pallet Catering and in hotels. I worked for Emory as well as Hilton and some other Crestline hotels before going to the airport, which I had been for the last 7 years. And recently I took over as a director of Paschal's.
Oh,
Mm.
Christie?
Great. So I started with my mother. I did go to school, but I think I just kind of found my way inside a kitchen some way somehow. So I went to Georgia State for my undergrad and for my master's a couple of years back. And as I was doing it, I just felt that, I just felt a calling more so towards the kitchen rather to be in the office. I felt like it was better. I had more fun. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the people. I enjoyed eating. I enjoyed cooking. And I think it was really just that. It was just the atmosphere that the restaurant was bringing all around to everybody that was coming in. It was a lot of work, and I didn't necessarily want to do that work in the beginning. But I think as time went on, I just fell more in love with it, and I just decided that, I didn't want to be in the office. I didn't want to work for anybody else. I didn't want to start and then having to stop. And I felt that maybe with the restaurant, I would be able to start and keep going. Yeah. So I think it's very simple for me. But we come from a family of mainly a lot of cooks, a lot of chefs that were already doing their own catering, whether it's my grandmother, et cetera, et cetera. And I think I like the feel of the success story behind it. And that was that. That was that for me specifically. So yeah.
So it seemed like it all started off at the home, and then you guys
Yes.
said we're gonna make it into
Yeah,
our
we're gonna make
professional
it into
lives.
something. Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, the common thing that I think all of you guys have is Black Foodways somewhere in another.
Hmm.
So what is Black Foodways, and what does it mean to you? If
For
Chef
me,
Todd wants us to,
Ernest.
go ahead. Yeah, for me, it's more about the blending of cuisine. When you look at it, you think that Black Foodways is just that, the soul food, when it's really a combination of all cuisines. You have Caribbean influence, African influences, as well as the naturalness of the ingredients that's put into the food. So it's what is grown and what is fresh. That's kind of what it means to me.
Chef Todd?
Black Foodways is really an amalgamation of travel, of overcoming, and knowledge. Right? It is not just a pinch of this and a pinch of that, which a lot of times people associate with Black Foodways. I mean, anytime you can make chitlins taste good, to have that type of skill, and also to understand why we were brought to this country to cultivate things like rice and beans. And then our influence not only on our country here, but also we look at our influence on places like Mexico and even Canada, in our foodways and traditions that we brought here from Africa and other parts of African continent. You really understand that it's really just a blending, like Ernest said, of different ideas. However, there's a lot more skill and a lot more technology and a lot more ingenuity that is involved in it. And it's not just suffering food. A lot of times we get, to say that, well, soul food comes out of slave food. But that's not necessarily true, because it takes a lot of skill in order to make things taste well. And it also takes a lot of skill to cultivate the earth, especially during trying times, winters and things like that. And you understand that a lot of the food systems in this country is based upon Black foodways. So it deserves the same respect, if not even more respect, than any other cuisine, such as French cuisine or Japanese cuisine. A lot of times people look at and say that is the highest of foodways. But no, I mean, this foodways is really about overcoming obstacles in order to serve delicious food to great people.
Yes, for me, Black Foodways, I think it's more about the connection of the people. Of course, you have the techniques and everything that comes with it, but it's the connection of the people from the Caribbean, as stated earlier, Caribbean, or Latin America, and Latin America, as well as even Europe, even Asia, and Southeast Asia, like India, etc. So I think it's the connection of people. And the way people bound together, whether it is through food or not, right? So, the Atlantic slave trade, coming here, cultivating the rice and all of those things, and now you see many documentaries and things where it's connecting back people and showing you the traces of where food may actually be coming from, whether it is from Africa, whether it's from Asia or the likes. So I think Black Foodways is the people, because without the people, you don't have the food. Without the need, you don't have the food. So yeah, that's what that is for me at the moment.
And, Mr. Oliver, you said something and it really stuck out in my head. You said, it's a blending of cuisine and is what is grown and fresh. And often, I think Black food is stereotyped as, unhealthy, not fresh. And I think those are one of the many misconceptions of Black foodway. So can you guys elaborate on what are some other misconceptions that people have about Black food, especially here in Atlanta?
It's just like you said. It's seen as not even just that it is unhealthy, but it's not seen as a cuisine in itself. Like Chef Todd was saying, that here in Atlanta they think sometimes that soul food means that it has no soul. It doesn't reflect a cuisine. It's an idea when it's really the ultimate of cuisine, because it blends everything together, and it comes from the earth, and adding some game and meat into that. So it's more than just the misconception of it being unhealthy, because it's the misconception that it's not a cuisine in itself.
Yeah. I think for African food specifically, it's more well, for my area, it's specifically that it's nasty,
Mhm.
right? It smells different. It looks completely different for some people or for certain meals. Very if you have like specific native meals, they look very, very different. They look very slimy, or they look dark. They look, they have a lot of fermentation going on. Um, but again, I think that's a misconception. It may look that way, but I think you have to, again, because it's coming from the earth, or because it's coming from your soul, you have to let it grow into something else, right? But you can't deny that it's yucky or it's not good just because it's not from where you are, or it's not something that you're necessarily familiar with. I think that's a misconception that a lot of people have, that we try to kind of dispel whenever they walk in the door day to day.
You know, one thing is that we're not a monolith. We all don't cook the same way.
Mm-hmm.
My sister and I are 7 years apart, grew up in the same household, and the way I cook collard greens and the way she cooks collard greens are completely different. And so it shows that that we're a diverse culture, and in our diversity, the way we approach food might be different. But it's still rooted in our cultural heritage, which I believe is very important to understand, that we have a heritage, that we're not just a bunch of people that were put on a boat and got here, out of our own, suffering. No, we have a heritage, just like the drum is part of our heritage, from Africa, so are a lot of the foodways. And as we continue to establish our culinary culture in Atlanta, it's even more important to recognize, where all this food came from and how we are reinterpreting it into our own family lifestyle.
That's very true.
Yes.
That's so true, and to Christie's point, I remember, one time at school, I brought in some, I think it was like efo which
Mm-hmm.
is stewed greens, which is
Yeah.
kind of akin to collard greens.
Mm-hmm.
And
And
someone
callaloo.
said, hmm? And
And callaloo.
callaloo.
Yeah.
And someone said, oh, that's nasty. And I was like, have you tasted it? This is delicious. But
Yeah, yeah, it is something we have to consistently kind of work through, just to not change people's mind, but just open up their minds, right? Just because it's not something that you see every day on your plate doesn't mean that it's not similar to. I think in West Africa in general, or in a lot of African countries, we try to use everything. We use everything on the vegetable, or everything on the fruit. So let's say sweet potato, you'll make the potato, you can fry it, you can boil it, you can do whatever you want to do, you can pound it, but then you have the grass, or not the grass, but the root of the sweet potato that we use now, we cut and we make potato leaf with it. So there's which is also similar to callaloo or collard greens, and things in that way. So it's so much more than so it's like when you're not explaining to someone, you have to explain to them that, oh, it comes from a sweet potato. So if you like a sweet potato, you may actually like the greens that come along with the sweet potato. But I think in all, it's just part of the educational process that food also brings um, to people in general.
Actually, this sounds like a good cookbook. Collard greens, callaloo, and efo.
Good.
Y'all can use that. I'll give you the copyright for it. All right. And so, all these dishes have roots in Africa, but they're, all different in their own ways.
Very much.
So what are some differences you see between Black American cooking in Atlanta and African cooking?
And what cooking? I'm sorry, I cut off.
And African cooking.
Um, Honestly, I don't see too much difference. I really don't. I mean, I think it's based on the palate of the people, right? We in West Africa, we're not too much on sweets. So maybe in some things that some people may add a little bit of ketchup or a little bit of sugar, we wouldn't necessarily do that. We're more about the fermentation of certain foods, right? We like that sour taste, or we like that bitter taste in certain items as well, right? We want the food to be strong, right? Because people have had to work in fields or had to do a lot of things throughout the day. So maybe only eat once a day. So you want something very heavy, very filling, very hearty, right? But I don't see any difference per se, because it's a part of the people. So the struggles that we may have had in West Africa in general have transcended up until now, and we cook not similarly, but we cook similar to the way we used to cook then, still, right? And because and we eat this in similar ways as well, and I think that's the same, a little bit of the same here. If you were eating chitlins back then, you probably may still be eating chitlins now, right? It's not out of because that's all that's available, but that's just because that's what you like now. It's part of your people. It's part of your palate now. So I don't see too much of a difference, because you would say, oh, collard greens and it's just stewed. So it's really all the same, just in different fonts.
I agree with that. But for the most part, it is the same. There may be different techniques with each. If you're talking the black soul as the soul food per se, you're talking just a kind of a hearty plate. So when you're looking at African food, you're talking more of the stew. You're thinking more in terms of the stewing and the grilling and the steaming of the food. So is the differences is only in the style of cooking, but not for the love of the food. Both cultures have a deep love for what they're doing and for the food that they put out. They cook with love and soul, and that's whether it's a traditional black soul food or African soul. They both cook with that same love in their food, that same tradition.
The thing I look at is regions and understanding
Mhm.
what grows in the terroir, of those regions, that what you will see the differences and the approach to those differences. However, the techniques and the hearts, and where it came from is the same. You look at something like okra, whereas, it's used in many different ways, either, thickening, gumbo, or you do it fried and crispy. It's really the regional differences that might, also look at it. You look at the seeds of okra, and you can use those as, as a substitute for couscous. You use it as a thickening agent. You can use it as a salad. So we use, these ingredients in many different ways. And so it's maybe regional differences, but not the roots and the hearts, of where it came from.
Correct.
But so there are regional differences, but for pretty much regional differences and different techniques, but all still has love in it, correct?
Yes.
Absolutely.
And then so we all have our dishes and our favorite foods. So my next question is, what dish on your menu, or just in general, it could be your dish that you like to cook after a long day of work, do you think best
Yeah,
represent?
we don't we don't cook after a long day.
That's for sure.
It's takeout after that,
Get you
right?
some cereal.
All right.
Some cereal, and you're good to go. Go to
All right.
sleep.
All right.
So, what dish on your menu or just in general do you think best represents your idea of Black food?
Oh wow. That's a tough question because it's really seasonal. It could be daily. You look at Atlanta, globally, Atlanta has really been misconstrued about understanding Black foodways. I mean, if you look at the popularism of things like Magic City wings, and think that, well, that's Atlanta. You have to come to Atlanta to get wings from Magic City, or or you think it's just soulful, and it's way more sophisticated and diverse than that. So, I don't really have a to-go food on a daily basis. It just, to me, depends on what season it is and how I'm approaching cooking, such as, it's more stews and things like that in the wintertime, and more lighter ingredients in the spring and summer. But that's what, to me, is what makes Black foodways, so important. Just growing up as a kid, it wasn't a lot of meats that we ate. Meat was reserved for Sunday dinners and things like that. It was more vegetable focused and regional focus. And I believe that is what true Black foodways is about, and that's still what Atlanta is about. It's just that we've gotten so used to having access to things such as having mac and cheese every day, which is not really the crust of what Black foodways are. It's really more vegetable focused, first adding meats and sometimes seafood, to those things depending on where you're located, and really using those things in order to define what the food that we eat on a daily basis. But as far as afterwards, it might be a whiskey or two, but other than that, I left all the cooking at the restaurant.
Yeah. I
I,
think
I,
oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead, man.
I think for me, for after work, I don't. It's either I don't eat. It's either cereal or it's either ice cream. That's it. There's nothing else that I want to be cooking or slaving over to be doing. But I think it is a combination of things that you may want to eat or may not want to eat in general, just because again the season is different. I personally I like okra. I like okra, but I also like simplicity of like a rice, a meat, and a stew. That's it. So just in the same way as somebody would be basically say they want rice and butter and chicken, that's it. Very, very simple. Also, we have, I think in West Africa, a lot of times we say special meats or special things for special days or special times. And I think that's what kind of goes over in my head where during Christmas or New Year or whatnot, then we don't have turkeys per se, but you'll get a pork or you'll get a lamb, a whole lamb, and then they'll do that over the stove, over the fire, over the oven, and stuff it with couscous. So those are special. There are special times or special meals for special occasions or special times. Um, Also, same thing. We didn't eat meat every day. You didn't get to. So you'll have maybe chicken on Sundays, or like a guinea fowl on Sundays, and that would be the special thing because chicken maybe would have been expensive. So yeah, that's what it is for us.
And I feel the same. I'm not cooking after a long day. I spend 10, 12, 15 hours in the restaurant. The last thing I'm thinking about when I roll into the house is grilling a steak. I'm typically just sitting back doing the same, something simple. Rice, chicken. And in the restaurant, it can be anything for that day. It could be a traditional plate, or it can be oxtails. It just kind of depends on what you feel and what you love. It can be, there's no go-to plate per se, because it's just what I feel and what I like to see at that moment.
And so another trend I'm seeing is everyone's tired after work. And so, I feel like we all can, vibe with that, as the kids say. And so what are some challenges that you guys see in owning a Black restaurant in Atlanta?
Ooh, that's the one.
How do the challenge is again that we're not a monolith. Just because you got this meal at this person's restaurant doesn't mean you're going to get it at this restaurant. We don't succumb to cooking all the same food ways, and we don't succumb to cooking all alike. There are different techniques that we all grew up, which are different. Like I said, my sister and I, 7 years apart, grew up making collard greens differently. So that's and then what we charge for food. People believe that we should charge less because our food might be considered on a lesser totem pole than other cuisines, such as French, and things like that. And if you take a pot of collard greens, an example, and you cook them on Wednesday, they're really the best on Friday. So think about it. You had to cut, clean, wash, cook, and everything. You had to let them sit for 2 days. And at the most, what can we charge for them? A side of collard greens. At the higher end, you might be able to charge $10 for them, but it took 2 days in order for them to make those taste good. And so when it comes to charging the true price for food, people might think that we're being either expensive or sometimes even considered bougie, or even considered being, you've been hanging around white people or white chefs too long, in order to, because you're charging charging this amount for food. However, I mean, it takes a lot of work in order to make, any restaurant viable and profitable. But secondly, a lot of these cuisines and a lot of these food waste that we're cooking takes a long time to prepare. And so not only are you paying for the ingredients, you're paying for the time to prepare. If you get into the nerd side or the really business side on it, think about it, that same pot of collard greens. How long did it sit on the stove? How much gas do we take in order to make that pot of collard greens? Compared to a steak, we could put a steak on, we could turn it on, we can turn on the pan for 5 minutes, we can cook a steak for 15 minutes, we can turn that pan off, and it doesn't have the same either, budget constraints that we have. As well as, if you understand, how things grow, it takes the same amount of time to grow collard greens as it does to raise a cow. So we're not talking about the same thing. We're not talking about, dissimilar things when it talks about the time in order for these things to grow and in order to make them palatable, in order ready to eat as well. So those are just some of the challenges, you see from the business side, as well as you see from the cultural side, that people think that, that it's not supposed to be as expensive as it is in order to make this food waste.
Definitely. I can piggyback on that. I think it's labor intensive. Our food is, I believe, a little bit more labor intensive. I can cook French food. I lived in France. It's not, it's not to say that that's not difficult on its own, or it's not technique based as well. But our food is very labor intensive. Let's say egusi, for example. Egusi takes about three to 4 hours. That's probably like the longest that it takes the longest. And then you have to look at the scale at which we're cooking. We're not cooking for just one specific person. We're cooking for however many number of person per day, right? That we're hoping walk into those doors and buy the food, right? So those are things that we always have to keep in mind and be aware of whenever we're serving people. I think the other thing is, as well, it is expensive. We can't say that it's cheap, right? We can't say that African food or African American food is cheap to buy, right? And I think what we have to dispel to our community is just that, it takes work, it takes time, just because you yourself, you don't want to cook it at home because it takes the time. That it's going to take time out of your day, right? So we have to be mindful of the actual people that are behind the scenes that are making the food for the customers. And I think that that's something that they kind of, I don't want to say they forget, but that's just not in the forefront of a customer's mind whenever they're coming to our specific establishment. And also, West African food is very vast. For us specifically, I'm from Togo, so it is a bit. It will be different from someone from Nigeria, right? But just because we use the same ingredient, again, we're sisters, we're brothers and sisters, as you said earlier. You and your sisters cook very differently, but it's the same meal at the end of the day. Um, so I think those are things that people are consistently, not complaining, but they like to mention, oh, I went here and it was like this, and you're not serving it the same way, or etc. But we are trying to build something or make food that can attest to everybody, that everyone is able to kind of find a piece of home, specifically for Le Nouveau Maquis. So we want everybody, whether you are from Togo, Nigeria, Senegal, Benin, wheresoever on that coastline, you should be able to find something that would remind you of home, or that would, bring you some kind of connection to where you come from.
So the piggyback, I agree on everything they said. The most difficulty is the pricing of the plate, because people look at soul and African cuisine and look at the plate, and because it looks to them that it's so simplistic that the cost should be simplistic, but not looking at how much time and labor and even ingredients it took to make that. So at home you may be doing just salt and pepper and fried chicken. Just realizing the blend of flavors and things that a restaurant puts in care, they put just to do that fried chicken. The marinade that they use and all of that goes into just making fried chicken, and to put that on the plate for that customer. So it's really leveling expectations. because you walk in every restaurant and think it's, well, if you're getting fried chicken, it should be similar everywhere you go. When the reality is you can walk in 10 different restaurants and get a different flavor fried chicken. Just something as simple as fried chicken. It's very rare. You can go around even in chain restaurants and it tastes exactly the same everywhere you go. Maybe a little more saucy, a little more spicy, a little more of this. Even though it's the same ingredients, it could be the way the ingredients were put into that pot or that marinade or that makes that slight difference. But it's leveling the expectations that makes it the most difficult because they're not level and they should be.
And I think also, just one more point, I think the issue sometimes is I think they believe that everyone is into the Cisco of everything, right? So,
Correct.
and that is that's something that it's just not correct, right? So for us specifically, we're going here and here, finding different vendors for different things because we know that this person has the best price or this person has the better quality. So it is something that in the background you always have to work on. You always have to find the better ingredient or the better pricing. So it's something that a lot of us have to. It's something that a lot of us have to think about whenever we're walking into these establishments as to how are they cooking and where are they even getting these things from. You don't know. They could have flew it from Africa. They could have flew it from Asia, and then you have to think about the quality of it. So if you're here at the moment, it's because you enjoy the food. If you're here at the moment or you keep coming back, it's because there is something there that you want to keep eating or keep discovering, right? So therefore, to put a price on that to me is a little bit it's a little bit bonkers in that way.
Mm. And so, I'm going to get to these specialized questions I have for y'all. And so for Chef Todd, what was your experience like preserving Black foodways of Atlanta in your cookbooks?
Great experience about sharing, things in cookbooks is that I get to talk about myself, but with my last cookbook, Roots Art Soul, I get to talk about other people and really understand their point of view and their food ways and know why I cook the way that I do because I shy away from the word discovered because you can't discover people that are already there. That's one of the terms that we use in this country, especially when we talk about colonialism, that they discovered, us in the land. Well, these people are already there. You can't discover people in that same vein. But what I did understand is that there is an underlining of Atlanta culture that I don't think gets enough respect outside of other art forms such as music, film, things like that. That Atlanta has a distinct way of presenting foodways to masses of people that they don't realize that they're touching several different parts of the country at one point in time, and that from block to block the way we approach food is quite differently, and that you can go from being just straight in the hood or you can go to the most bougie place and still recognize that you're still in Atlanta and understand that those foodways continue to grow. Where I think that there's a disconnect in foodways is that though we use the fryer a lot, all our foodways are not cooked in the fryer. We don't cook everything in the fryer. So fried food is not necessarily a full part of what our cuisine. That things like, braising oxtails or making rice properly, which is a real sophisticated technique that people don't necessarily give us credit for and understanding how to cook rice or even cultivating rice. That, from block to block, there's different ways that we approach cooking rice, something that's just that basic, as well as how we influence the rest of the country, just where the oxtail explosion happened here first. And then everyone around the country, I can use the word discovered, discovered oxtails and why it used to be $1.99 a pound. I'm sure, Christie and Ernest can understand this. It used to be $1.99 a pound, and now it's
And now it's
right. It is more expensive than flat iron steak. That we set a lot of trends for the country in celebrating, Black foodways, but still when people visit here, they only look at us as just one part of the landscape of food, and primarily soul food. And I can understand that. I can respect that when you understand the history of the civil rights movement and things like that. When you come to Atlanta, you want to understand the civil rights and be part of that civil rights culture. But we have expanded way beyond that. Just a plate of certain types of soul food, and understanding that soul food is only one part of what we do, and it's a great part of what we do. Don't get me wrong, but you look at things like barbecue, and barbacoa, and those traditional ways. We also shape those landscapes, and a lot of those things happen in Atlanta, especially Atlanta being a gateway to the rest of the country.
And so my next specialized question is for Mr. Ernest. And since you're at the historic Paschals,
Definitely historic.
So except Todd did give me a kind of a leeway into that. Yes, Paschal's has been a unofficial headquarters for the civil rights movement back then, because it opened its doors for not just the civil rights, but for every person. No, it was one of the first restaurants back then, that was black owned, that seat both white and black together. So it was always at the forefront of not just pushing the history, but pushing the rights and fighting alongside. Mr. Paschal and H.H. Russell, both were firm believers in the rights of people, not just in civil rights. So it was there for when they came off of the streets are released from jail. They were open to come there just to have a hot meal. So it was a place to meet. It was a place of sustenance, and just a place of community. So everyone sees it not just as the civil rights movement, but as home of civil rights here in Atlanta. And we're trying hard to continue to preserve that, but also to be a leader in cultivating soul food in Atlanta as well.
The one thing I love about soul food, especially the civil rights movement, is throughout the South, you have like key restaurants where they met. In New Orleans, they have Dookie Chase. Here we have Paschal's. And where I'm from in Richmond, we have what we call the Croaker Spot, which serves the best fried croaker, in my opinion, but I'm biased because I'm from there. So, and so my next question is for Christie. And why do you think African food is only getting its flowers now, especially here in Atlanta?
Honestly, I think it started with Black Panther. It sounds no, and it sounds very laughable, but it started with Black Panther and with the movie itself, right? I think when people see things and hear things, they then want to go a little bit further into the culture, right? I think that opened up a lot of ways. But I think now it's just because people are doing a lot of ancestry.com. They're more into that. They want to learn about their past, about their ancestry, right? And for us specifically at Le Nouveau Maquis, it's not the issue, but what we strive to do is to provide something for every part along that coastline, as I was saying a little bit earlier. It's not just about Togolese food, right? Because there's so much diversity in Atlanta. There are so many. If where we are now is in Stone Mountain, right? And so we're right next to Clarkston, where when I came to America, I grew up. Clarkston is one of, I think, in America, I think maybe top 3 or top 5 of immigrant and refugee city. So that means every single part, whether it's Nepal, whether it was Ethiopia, whether it's Somalia, whether it was Liberia, Sierra Leone, they have passed through Clarkston, or a lot of people have passed through Clarkston for their community before they went onwards to wherever else they were going to go, right? It's kind of a passage. And throughout that, I grew up with a lot of people from different countries. I barely saw any Togolese because we're such a small country. But the restaurant here, it's aimed at providing something for everyone to be able to enjoy, everyone to be able to touch base. And I think that in itself it means that even if you did your ancestry and you came in here, you're like, oh, I want Nigerian food. Maybe you might end up liking Guinean food. You know what I'm saying? It's not a monolith. It's not a one size fits all thing. And I think because the food is so diverse, because you have so many different options, so many different countries to even look at in order to have options, I think that's why we may be getting our flowers now. Not necessarily because of the flavor, but I just think it's because it's a discovery factor. It's something new. It's something to learn, right? And a human brain, that's just how we work. We want to know. We're curious people in general. So I think that's that's what's driving that at the moment, apart from social media and all of that. But and a fufu and egusi. But a lot of people come in, they'll get fufu and egusi, they won't even like it, but they'll like something else, right? I tell a lot of the customers whenever they come in, it's more so take something you know with something you don't know. You may not like fufu, but you know you like greens, you like collard greens. So maybe you'll get a eforiro, as you were saying, or you'll get a egusi, or you'll get something green, right? But you'll eat it with a starch like rice because you know what rice tastes like already, right? So it's a thing of mixing. It's so much customization possible with African food, whether you wanted no meat or a vegan option or a vegetarian option or a vegan option, whether you want just chicken, whether you want just beef, whether you want to mix everything together, it's possible, right? It's almost limitless in that way. Um, for people. And I think giving them or having the option itself is what's driving people to even go into any African restaurant or any Black American restaurant because there's so many options. It's not just chicken and fries. It's not just rice and this. It's just the possibilities are just endless. It's just endless, and I think that's what it is.
Thank you. And we at that 14-minute mark. So, I want to make sure that we open up the panel for, discussion or for questions from the audience now. Do we have any questions? Well, since we don't have any questions so far, let's go to some more questions I have, right?
Okay.
Okay.
So, we often have to think about the future. And so if you had to create a plate that reflects, the future of Atlanta and Black Foodways, what would be on that plate?
For me, I think it's not exactly what would be on that plate, but what style would be on that plate. It would be kind of a blending of cultures. For me, I would like to see the future going where we expand more into the flavor and the blending of those flavors. So where soul food can expand and be more than just this one genre, but more of a opening or awakening of that, so that everyone can be able to experience the true nature of who we are and where we come from.
It's a really great question, John. One thing is that it's happening in Atlanta is that uh, the plate is, for me, it's a little bit less important right now, as it is more so how do we help more businesses open and really shape Atlanta that way and not let our cultural heritage and food heritage go by the wayside in a lot of our communities. One thing that has been a real problem for us in Atlanta is owning the real estate in order to make restaurants, viable and valuable in order to keep this heritage going. And we have to do a better way of starting with home ownership in order to have people have, equity in their homes in order to start restaurants and things like that. That's a lot of restaurants start that way. We have to have more access to capital in order to do so. And then we have to own the land, because just because a concept doesn't work does not mean that you should just close the doors and walk away and give the landlord the keys to things that you already built and putting in the infrastructure such as AC units and plumbing and hood systems and grease traps. We have to find a better way to make this more equitable for us to own our own land in order to make sure that our restaurants stay open and that we have the ability to pivot when it's time to pivot and move into a new era of dining in Atlanta.
I think that's a great point. I think for me, it's more about maybe advocacy, having more people in higher standing or in higher places to be able to advocate or to become those people that advocate for others, right? We have to be able to advocate for each other as restaurants in general, especially for West African food or African food in general. Although there is a lot of people that are coming in and wanting to know more about the food, it's still a very hard process to educate, right? We don't necessarily have all day to sit there with each person to say, okay, this is where this comes from, and this is how it is, and this is why it tastes like this, and this is the time that it takes, right? So the advocacy and the educational aspect is very, very important. Apart from the real estate. That is also needed, right? And the capital, because it's just not enough money. That's just what it is. Especially for small businesses like us, it's just not enough money in order to do the things that we need to do to keep going. So yeah, that would be that for
I
me.
just want to think back a little bit more on Christie was just saying, though, that, when it comes to the advocacy work, that, we have to hold our elected leaders in that as well, and ensure that they are doing the absolute best in order to make sure that these restaurants and this cuisine and everything move forward as well. You look at the influence, like we have the World Cup coming next year. And we see, Michelin come here and things like that, but we haven't seen the advocacy in the community to talk about what, Michelin is going to do in the community, where a lot of this food waste started, as well as what is we doing. Now, Invest Atlanta, of course, does a great job of doing things in Atlanta, but I'm talking about the whole entire metropolitan area, where we have to ensure that the media that comes here, is investing into the community in order to ensure that these foodways, continue to go, as well as making sure that they understand that there is a capitalization that has to return back into the community in order to make sure that these foodways continue to move forward.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
And I was, we talk about, advocacy, holding our elected leaders accountable. I'm thinking of like how social media plays a role in all of that. Because one reason why I was able to find like Nouveau Maquis was because of social media. And, right now we're holding our elected leaders accountable via social media. And, I'm going to pivot a little bit since we're almost out of time, but I would like to, how have you seen Atlanta food evolve, or Atlanta food scene evolve throughout the years? I think that would be the last question we have.
Well, I can start off, understanding when I first got here, and Christie, oddly enough, when I first moved here, I was in Clarkston, so I understand how Clarkston is the gateway to Atlanta from my standpoint. I was right off of Ponce when I first moved here, and really was opened my eyes to the diversity of Black foodways as well, and not only from West Africa standpoint, but also from the Caribbean, understanding really understanding where my taste buds for Haitian food came along and things like that as well. But when I first got here, it was 4 certified master chefs here. And that's really the only city in the country that had 4 certified master chefs at one period of time. And to see Atlanta, return back into those foodways, such as having Michelin here, having having more tasting menus available and having more diversity just on the daily plates, it has been great. But I think we have we have to go back a little bit further to understanding how we have to incorporate more of the farming community into Atlanta foodways and make sure that they're celebrated, and even higher regards than chefs, because I'm nothing without the farmers. I'm nothing without any ranchers or fishers or people who who are preserving seeds and things like that. I'm nothing without these people. And if we're not telling their story with full diligence and ensuring that we are saying that, hey, they're cultivating the lands, I'm just a product of their work, then we're going to be doing Atlantic cuisine an injustice. And urban farmers has been a hallmark of Atlantic cuisine for a very, very long time. And we have to tell their stories more ferociously in the media to ensure that those foodways and pathways continue to move forward.
Definitely.
I have some of the same feelings. I think we have to address food insecurities and the lack of fresh produce in Black communities. So which makes it more difficult for a small business to thrive because the product is not there. They have to go outside of that community in order to find those products or to bring those products in. Is not readily available or have really access to it with the development of insecurities and foods and the socioeconomical thing that goes on in the climate when it comes to Black communities.
Yeah. I think for me it's more about, it's just the root of it all. So just like you have to go back to the farmers, you have to go back to the base problems that are actually happening in order to know what or how the city is evolving through food. So addressing the problems with the farmers, whether it's the food insecurities, whether it's just the people and just the areas that we're in general. I've seen many restaurants that are now even closing, whether they're in Midtown, just because their area is just not suitable for what they're doing, or maybe there's too much construction going on, which is obstructing, people from even walking into those doors if you're counting on foot traffic. So there's a lot of things that need to just be addressed in general, right? We have, even where I am now, there's MARTA, right? But there's a lot of people that may want to get to us that don't have MARTA. So those things are all part of the greater problem, in order to provide access to food for people in general in Atlanta.
Well, I just want to say I'm full. That's a pun if y'all got that. I'm absolutely full on this conversation.
You get a gold star for that one, my friend.
I appreciate it. I'm known for my puns.
Okay.
And so I'm just absolutely full from this conversation. And I appreciate every one of you guys taking time out to discuss your thoughts on foodways, your beliefs and I ultimately believe food is a philosophy.
Yes.
And you guys just explained y'all's philosophy in such eloquent ways. And I just want to give you guys a virtual round of applause for taking your time out today, for being here with us at AARL today.
It was our pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting us.
No problem.